assert that effective execution of Agenda 21 will require a profound reorientation of all human society. Envision Utah is frequently cited by advocates of Agenda 2030 as a paradigm to emulate. However, this model is fundamentally misleading. Now, what is Agenda 2030? Started out as Agenda 21, and in summary, supporters of Agenda 21 assert that effective execution of Agenda 21 will require a profound reorientation of all human society. Unlike anything the world has ever experienced, a major shift in the priorities of both governments and individuals, and an unprecedented redeployment of human and financial resources. This shift will demand that a concern for the environmental consequences of every human action be integrated into individual and collective decision-making at every level. End of quote. For a more detailed report on Agenda 21, its history and plans, check out the reports in the links below. Utah, often perceived as a conservative state, has ostensibly expressed opposition to Agenda 2030. Utah, in fact, has even formally expressed its opposition to Agenda 2030, citing concerns regarding its implications for property rights and its perceived anti-family agenda. In 2013, the state legislature passed SJR, meaning Senate Joint Resolution 11, which says, in part, quote, "Don't purposefully or accidentally infringe on property rights. Be informed on Agenda 21 and buzzwords like sustainable development. Support measures that protect local sovereignty and private property rights." Though this resolution was sponsored by a conspirator, this resolution demonstrates that Agenda 2030 is not merely a concept, but rather a significant concern that has been acknowledged by a majority of the legislature, prompting them to officially document their recognition. Now, what does Agenda 2030 mean for you and for me? The term sustainable development is often regarded as a nebulous buzzword by proponents of Agenda 2030. While it may appear appealing at first glance, its interpretation can vary widely among individuals. Therefore, it is essential to explore what this concept signifies to the architects, the authors, the builders of Agenda 2030, and the phrase itself. During the opening speech of the Rio Summit that created Agenda 21, the precursor to Agenda 2030, Undersecretary General to the United Nations, Maurice Strong, said, quote, "Current lifestyles and consumption patterns of the affluent middle class involving high meat intake, use of fossil fuels, appliances, air conditioning, and suburban housing are not sustainable. A shift is necessary, which will require a vast strengthening of the multilateral system, including the United Nations." End of quote. As we can see, proponents of Agenda 21 and Agenda 2030 assert that your current way of living is unsustainable. Practices such as consuming meat, utilizing gasoline, and relying on refrigeration and air conditioning are deemed unsustainable. It is crucial to keep this perspective in mind when encountering discussions advocating for sustainable development. Agenda 2030 is implemented through deception. Now we look at the group Envision Utah, which was established in 1997 as indicated on its official website. Quote, "To keep Utah beautiful, prosperous, healthy, and neighborly for future generations." End of quote. The initiatives aimed at executing Agenda 2030 align seamlessly with the programs in which Envision Utah is involved. From concepts such as sustainable development to smart growth, Envision Utah is actively advancing the objectives of Agenda 2030. Now, how did the founders of Envision Utah intend to achieve this ambiguous and broad goal, which could be interpreted in numerous ways? Supporters from the Brookings Institute suggest that Envision Utah realizes its objectives through misleading tactics. They lie to you. deception is key to the framers of the Agenda 2030 scheme. In fact, J. Gary Lawrence, who was the advisor to Bill Clinton's Council on Sustainable Development, explained how deception must be used to get their agenda through. Quote, participating in a UN-advocated planning process would very likely bring out many of the conspiracy-fixated groups and individuals in our society. This segment of our society who fear one world government and a UN invasion of the United States through which our individual freedom would be stripped away would actively work to defeat any elected official who joined the conspiracy by undertaking local Agenda 21. So we call ourselves something else, such as comprehensive planning, growth management, or smart growth. End of quote. So Agenda 2030 in so-called conservative Utah. In December 2012, Brookings Institute Mountain West, a recognized division of the Brookings Institution based at the University of Las Vegas in Nevada, published a report on Envision Utah titled, quote, The Utah Model, Lessons for Regional Planning, end of quote. It is important to note the term regional planning, and we have the link to the report in the description. In the Brookings Institute document, it explains, quote, Utah has become an unlikely leader in regional planning. The organization that emerged as a key driver of regional planning in Utah in building a consensus around regional growth management holds lessons for other regions, end of quote. Envision Utah then is regarded as a model to emulate. Furthermore, the Brookings report elaborates on the achievements of Envision Utah in the context of regional growth management, saying, quote, Envision Utah conducts a professional survey of the local values before beginning any particular project. So the project is already in the planning stages. They know what they're going to do, but they do a survey to find out what everybody wants. Continuing on. The results of the survey are used to tailor the language of the public process and frame the proposals and principles so that they are widely acceptable, end of quote. So they admit right there that they use the survey to be able to learn how to sell the program, not to find out what you want to do, but to be able to sell their program. Envision Utah uses Agenda 2030 style deception. So Envision Utah begins with a clear objective and subsequently conducts surveys to ascertain how to effectively promote their initiative. This involves customizing the language of the forthcoming promotional campaign to ensure that the campaign gains broad acceptance among the public. Brookings elaborates on the deception used, and that should be duplicated elsewhere, saying, quote, in many cases, it was a matter of rewording old ideas to match up with the identified values. High-density housing becomes housing choice for young families and aging parents. So just completely lie to you. They once more acknowledge that deception plays a crucial role in their achievements. Rather than accurately describing the cramped, overcrowded living conditions, they employ terminology commonly used in Utah, referring to it as housing choice. The misleading tactics persist in their ongoing initiative to gather 50,000 voices. It is important to note that the surveys are conducted not to solicit genuine input on future actions, but rather to refine the language of their pre-existing programs. The survey, for which they are incentivizing schools with paying them $1 per student to participate, presents predetermined options regarding how Utah is expected to develop over the next 50 years. This 50-year plan is yet another element of their deceptive strategy. The Brookings Institute report explains, quote, the organization never uses immediate land use controversies or public disagreements as springboards to participation and political action. The language of long-term values replaced more urgent take your medicine messages that might have turned people away. Envision Utah and manipulation. This indicates that Envision's 50,000 Voices campaign was an initiative aimed at encouraging individuals to refrain from contemplating their actions, as there is no immediate necessity to take your medicine now. The campaign presents choices that are crafted to lead you toward endorsing a specific outcome, utilizing labels and purported results associated with your selections. It is implied that the individuals at Envision Utah possess prophetic insight into future events. The event of this manipulation is evident in the naming of the option that preserves property rights after a dinosaur, suggesting that, like dinosaurs, those who opt for liberty may face extinction. Now, if Envision Utah resorts to deceit and manipulation to promote their agenda, it is self-evident that it is not something that most of us would support. Learn more about Agenda 2030 and their programs and how they're implementing in your local community at the links below.